Ladies and gentlemen, we will be voting, apparently. Well, we'll have the opportunity. Depends on whether or not enough signatures are collected. 365,880 signatures would be required to get a measure on the ballot that would allow Californians to vote whether California should secede from the Union. And that will also, if it qualifies, will be on the ballot with Tim Draper's plan that would split California into 3 separate states. That's the Yes California group. And Los Angeles, for instance, would be in the state of California. Then there would be a Northern California and a Southern California separate state that would include San Diego and Orange counties, etc. Let's talk with the co-founder of Yes California, Marcus Ruiz Evans. Good morning, Marcus. How are you?
Thank you for having us back on. Really appreciate coming back on. You had interviewed one of our other co-founders in January 2017, Louis Marinelli. So it's great to be invited back on.
We're happy to cover this topic. I mean, I don't agree with it, but we're going to be voting on it, so people should hear all sides. By the way, the website, if you want to read about this, is yescalifornia.org. And I want to make sure I'm representing this correctly. The plan would be to split California into 3 separate states, with Northern California, which would include L.A. County, and then Southern California. And the thought being that California is too big. Its political culture has essentially calcified up in Sacramento. And I don't disagree with any of that, by the way. I totally agree with everything.
That's not what we're about. That's the opposite plan.
Okay.
I'm sorry to
No, I want you to. That's why we've got you.
Plan. I thank you for having me on. I deeply appreciate it. That is the opposite plan. Calexit is against splitting up California. Tim Draper has tried to split up California before in 2014. That's actually what started Calexit. We were one of the 2 groups to oppose that, and we were right. We were saying, don't split up California. It's a nation. Californians seem to respond to that message, and now Tim Draper's back with a plan to split up California into 3 states. Calexit completely opposes that. Calexit is saying that we are better together, we operate as a nation, and we should unleash our potential, not be part of the federal system, not be held back, so that we can do as much as we want. Tim Draper is trying to split up one of the greatest places on earth, one of the most diverse cultures, one of the largest economies on earth, and we completely oppose Tim Draper. But I want to say this should be juicy for your listeners. I, as the president of Calexit, am thankful that Tim Draper got the signatures and that the plan for splitting up California is going to go for a vote, because it's going to fail so hard. His plan is going to fail so hard. So
his plan makes no sense. It makes no sense at an organic political reality level because this is the bluest of the blue states. Why would liberal Californians want to give conservatives electoral college votes that they could never win in an election?
Well, actually, if we're talking about Calexit, it makes no impact. There's a lot of this rumor mill going on that it's going to help Republicans. That's not true. So we actually looked at the numbers. 2 things. 1, California hasn't affected a presidential election since 1890. So the loss of electoral votes is going to mean nothing.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure, Marcus. I mean, let's look at the 2016 election. If let's say the new Southern California would include Orange County and Kern and San Diego County, it's conceivable that they could vote a Republican, in which case a proportionate amount of electoral votes would be peeled off, which currently would stay unified on the Democratic side. So it's theoretically possible, and of course it could theoretically be possible that it would add 2 U.S. senators to the Republican side of the ledger. That would never happen from California left together. But let's talk about what you want to see, because I don't believe that we should split California into 3 states, but I also don't believe in secession either. I don't believe that. I think we ended that at Appomattox Courthouse in 1865, and I think that the union should be preserved, and that whatever grievances people have in California about the federal government, it's transitory. Things change, and they can change, very much so from election to election. We just had 8 years of Barack Obama, and now we've got Donald Trump, and he too shall pass. He's not permanent.
Well, a lot of people think that the Civil War settled the question of secession. I understand this is not what people want to hear, but it didn't. The Supreme Court actually looked at the topic of secession after the Civil War in around 1870 in Texas versus White. That's Texas versus White. And they said that you can secede with consent of the states, meaning approval from Congress. You can't shoot your way out and just say you want to leave, but
right.
You can. So you can actually apply Congress and leave. A lot of people don't know that. The news won't even admit Texas versus White exists or that consent of the state is there.
But what I'm trying to figure out, Marcus, is what is it that you want California to have that California doesn't currently have? I mean, California, what is it that you? How is California being oppressed by the federal government?
So 3 things. One is that for 30 years we've lost more money than we get back. We're a donor state. We pay more into the federal system than we get out. At that same time, our taxes have gone up and our infrastructure has gone down. That's not a coincidence. 2016, we lost $103 billion. That's $103 billion in being a donor state. Our budget was around $170 billion.
Yeah, but Marcus, the reason that's happened is because the same kind of policies that California supports were affected by the federal government. We created giant social welfare programs and government projects at the federal level. And guess what? The rich states are the ones that are picking up the majority of the tab, just the way California's tax policy puts the absolute onus of social policy within the borders of California on the top wage earners. So essentially what you're objecting to is the very kinds of policies that California supports.
I'm not sure I grasped the question. What I'm saying is that we lost half of our budget in 2016. If we weren't part of America, we didn't have to raise the gas tax. We could cut our state income tax in half and still fund all of our programs.
No, you couldn't. If you weren't part of America, the people in California in 5 minutes would have universal health care that would bankrupt the state in 5 seconds. There's an unfunded pension liability. There's an unfunded pension liability in the state of California that's so enormous you need an astronomer to calculate what that number is. And how did we get that? We got that because blue state politicians gave away the store without any funds to pay for it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because those numbers aren't actually uncalculable. The debt is somewhere on the order of 100 to 400 billion for the unfunded liabilities for union members, which is true. But if we're losing $100 billion in 1 year, we could pay off that debt in 4 years.
But they won't.
So
they'll just add more programs.
The issues you just brought. You're assuming.
We've got a lot of experience with this. It's not like it's an uneducated guess. We have seen a pattern of it. And let's talk about infrastructure. Governor Jerry Brown is about to wrap up his remarkable career, has decided inexplicably to spend almost $100 billion, and it may be $100 billion, to build his crazy train, when we could have spent that money on building a light rail system in every major city in California, improve the environment immeasurably, improve the quality of life by taking cars off the roads. It would have been an enormous improvement, but instead he's got this pet project of his that's consuming billions and billions of dollars based on pure ego. That he just wants to have this as his legacy project. This has nothing to do with the federal government. This is a self-inflicted wound.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because this is exactly what I'm talking about. If we had an extra $100 billion, these issues go away.
Yeah, but that's just bad management.
You could fund the high-speed rail.
Bad management doesn't go away. I mean, you got a governor of a state. You got a governor of a state that's choking in CO2s from gasoline-powered engines exhaust and choking in traffic. And instead of fixing that problem, he goes on a spending spree to build a train to nowhere that might roll in 2033, might. And the problem is not the federal government. The problem is California. The problem is the people we elected and the way they chose to spend the money. This isn't the reason to break up the country. You want to take a state to break up the United States of America over our own mismanagement.
I don't think it's mismanagement. I think the fact is it's lack of funds. You're talking about half of our budget being wasted isn't a big deal, and that the government of California could waste $100 billion. That's never been done in California history. That is so much money, they couldn't waste it that quickly.
I have more confidence in their ability to waste it than you do. Look,
fair enough, but you don't have a historical precedent to prove it. Is all I'm saying.
Well, yeah,
it's a lot of money.
We kind of do because Prop 98, for instance, by law, one half of the state budget goes to public education, and a number of years ago when Jack O'Connell was the superintendent of public education for the state of California, we had him on the show, and I asked him, I said, Jack, if you could wake up tomorrow with a magic wand in your hand, and you could have all the funding you could dream of for K through graduate school to run the school systems in California exactly the way you want it, what would that number look like, just so that we had a ballpark? And there was a lot of hemming and hawing. And you know what the answer really came down to, Marcus, was more. The reality is that bureaucracies want more. They just want more because that's how they grow their power. And it's not necessarily more is not a reasonable number, because the bottom line is you have to have a tax base to support it. And we're driving a lot of our tax generators away. We were just covering this morning about the mass exodus from blue states, especially from retirees. California lost $20 billion just to Nevada alone when people cashed out their homes and then they moved. And a lot of them, by the way, are public employees who took their pensions with them. So, but this isn't because of the federal government. We have one-party rule in this state. And frankly, we got to look in the mirror and say, what decisions are we making?
Well, I couldn't disagree more. Everything you just said backs up Calexit. I just said that we lost $100 billion. You just said taxes are too high. I had just said we could cut state income taxes by 50%. So if taxes are too high, Calexit is the solution. Literally just said that.
Well, I know you did, but I don't. You see, where we disagree, and we are talking with Marcus Ruiz Evans, who's the co-founder of Yes California, YesCalifornia.org.
Thank you.
The difference is that I believe without a check or balance, California would spend itself into oblivion. And we are also talking about there's an enormous amount of infrastructure that doesn't belong to California, belongs to the people of the United States of America. Like, for instance, the interstate highway system and all kinds of infrastructure that's in this place, VA hospitals and all kinds of things that aren't the property of the state of California. They're the property of the federal government. And all that stuff has to be replaced.
That would be debated in the negotiation because the fact is that California paid for that. So whenever you look at historical separations, they look at where did the actual funding come from. I'm not so sure that it would immediately go to the federal government when we look at international legal precedents.
Well, I'm not interested in international legal precedents. I'm interested in American law because I'm an American. I was born one and I'm going to die one. And
Sure.
I find it sad that people find the perpetuation of the Union to be such a cavalier thing that we can just get mad and say we're going to take our marbles and go home because we're unhappy with fill in the blank. We can fix these problems without destroying the United States of America, without disrupting and breaking apart the United States of America.
I think we're in unique times. I mean, our governor said that it seems like the federal government has said, well, let me just throw out a couple unique historical things that have never happened before in California history. One, the Attorney General flies to California to say you can't secede. Never happened before in California history. Two.
Well, he never had to do that before. Hey, wait a second. Don't get to two. The reason the Attorney General flew to remind California about secession is that It hadn't happened before since 1850. We never had a generation of Californians who had such contempt for their own country that they would actually want to separate from the rest of the United States of America. So I'm sorry that...
But you just proved my point.
I'm still trying to find out what the point is. What point did I just prove?
That these are unique times. You said, no, this is like normal. I said, no.
Yeah, but you're blaming, you're acting like it's the federal government that's the outlier. I'm saying it's guys like you who want to take your marbles and go home and break up the United States of America because for some reason you've got a grievance that you're not, all of a sudden your grievance is taxes. Since when do blue state Democrats care about taxes? I mean, come on.
We've been around since 2014. When Obama was president. We've been saying the exact same talking points.
Well, you
haven't changed our talking points through Trump.
Well, that just means you've been wrong consistently for 4 years. So we'll keep going forward. Look, we will talk again, right. Marcus. We'll keep talking. It's going to probably be on the ballot. I just find it sad that people have such a feeble attachment to their country that they'd rather break it up than just pony up and roll up your sleeves and get involved in fixing the problems. YesCalifornia.org, 723. Yes, California. Yes, the state's right, people. Jefferson was a Virginian, never quite got America.